Can the police actually use lathi charge on a peaceful gathering of protesters? That's a question that everybody is asking. And that's the question we're going to attempt to answer in this video. Now, yesterday we watched with our jaws hanging open as the police used considerable lathi force on a gathering of protesters, young protesters. Some videos showed women being hit. There were allegations of protesters suffering broken ribs and cracked skulls and serious injuries. One woman is on the ventilator, from what we understand. The organizers of the Cockroach Janata Party say the Delhi police launched an unprovoked assault. The Delhi police has their own version of the events. They say the protesters ignored prohibitory orders, they broke barricades, they damaged government vehicles, and there are various media reports that say 100, 200, 120 security personnel were injured as well. So the question that we're attempting to answer in this video is, what does the Indian law say? Under what conditions are the police allowed to use force? At what point does a protest become unlawful? Does the police go straight to a lathi charge, or are there steps between unlawful and lathi charge? And, what are those steps? Can plainclothes policemen hit people? Can male officers hit women? At what point do the police cross the line, and what is the remedy if they do? That's what we're going to answer in this video, looking at the Indian law and various court cases in our history. Remember, before we start, like, share, subscribe, sign up for our membership. You get a bulletin every day that tells you everything you need to know without traumatizing you about what's happening with the news. Okay, let's get started. First, the law gives you a fundamental right to protest peacefully. Our country was born from peaceful protest. So Article 19(1)(a) gives every citizen the freedom of speech. Article 19(1)(b) gives every citizen the right to assemble peacefully without arms. That is where that comes from. But there is a restriction. Article 19(3) allows the state to impose reasonable restrictions in the interest of sovereignty and public order. What is public order? Now, we have to go back to a court case in 1965 where the Supreme Court heard a landmark case of Ram Manohar Lohia versus the state of Bihar. Lohia had given a speech and the government had arrested him for it. And the Supreme Court said very clearly that not every breach of law amounts to a threat to public order. So if someone has broken the law, they're not threatening public order. Threatening public order is when you're risking a riot. And so there has to be a clear application in the police's mind as to what is what. So the distinction matters because the government fundamentally will restrict your right to protest and keep saying public order, when what they are actually doing is avoiding embarrassment and avoiding inconvenience. And this was 1965, and it applies even today. So not every noisy protest threatens public order. Not every gathering which can be dispersed with a loudspeaker is threatening your public order. So the principle governs even today, and that is the basis of what we're talking about. Point number 2. And if we look at the protest that happened yesterday, the Delhi police had issued a public advisory the previous days saying that they have not granted permission for this protest. Now, Section 163 of the BNSS, which is the new IPC, was already in force in New Delhi. And this effectively tells people that they cannot gather. It is a law that prohibits gatherings. And the police reminded citizens that demonstrations are permitted only within Jantar Mantar and they cannot leave Jantar Mantar. They don't have permission to do so. Apart from that, 2,000 police personnel, 20 companies of paramilitary forces, anti-riot units, ambulances, mobile crowd command was deployed all over that neighborhood. So obviously the authorities were prepared for something. But here's something really important that's come out from that Section 163 of the BNSS law. It does not give the government unlimited power to ban protests, because effectively, if we have a fundamental right to protest peacefully and the government says, oh, I'm not giving you permission, and so if you protest, I will just come and beat you up. That's not how that works. So again, let's go back to a court case in the Supreme Court of 2020. It was called Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India, where the court ruled that these emergency powers cannot become a permanent tool to suppress dissent, which means that you can't just deny permission to protest and therefore never allow a protest to happen. Restrictions must be proportionate, they must be necessary, they must be based on material facts, they must always be open to judicial review. And that judgment remains one of the strongest safeguards against the arbitrary use of this law against assembly. So basically, yes, the government has permission, the police has permission not to grant permission to a protest, but they can't use it all the time simply to prevent protest. They must have a good reason not to grant that permission. And it has to be subject to judicial review, which means the court can take a look at that reason and decide whether the reason was valid or not. Now, in the meantime, Delhi High Court, in its wisdom, has decided, don't push these things on the court. I'm not going to hear it in an urgent manner. But we're hoping and keeping our fingers crossed as we maintain our faith in the judiciary that the Delhi High Court will remember this particular judicial review, that the decisions are subject to, and apply that judicial review. And we'll keep an eye on the court for that for you. The next question, here comes the main legal question that we started off. Can the police use force and under what conditions? Again, let's go now to a Punjab Haryana High Court judgment, and this was 1979. It was Karam Singh versus Hardayal Singh, and the court in this particular case laid down 3 conditions that have to be met in order for the police to use force. What are those 3 conditions? 1, there must be unlawful assembly or assembly that's likely to disturb public peace, which means that you should feel they have enough reason and evidence to believe that this assembly is going to turn riotous. 2, the assembly must be ordered to disperse, which means there has to be loudspeaker announcements telling them to disperse, warning them of action, and that has to be very clear. And number 3, the assembly must refuse that order to disperse, and only then the law permits force, which means that a lathi charge cannot legally be the first thing that you do. It has to come after lawful warnings have failed. It has to come after you believe that there is reason that this particular gathering is going to turn violent and riotous, and you have told them to disperse and they have refused to hear your warnings. Only then a lathi charge can become possible. This is according to a judgment that has come from the court. Now, here's something a lot of people don't know. The BNSS actually never uses, or the IPC or the code never uses the word lathi charge or baton charge. Instead, Section 148 simply authorizes the authorities to disperse the group using civil force. Now, what that force looks like has largely been developed over the years through police manuals and court decisions. The Bureau of Police Research and Development Model Police Manual lays down a graduated response. First, clear warnings, and this is the manual for the police. First, clear warning. 2, water cannons. 3, tear gas. If all of that fails, then lathi charge. Only in the gravest situation involving a threat to life does the law contemplate at all the use of firing. Every step must satisfy one principle, which is the force that is used has to be the bare minimum, and the force cannot become a punishment. It has to stop the moment your objective has been achieved. So if you put these 2 things together, what does the court judgment say? What does the law say? What does the police manual say? The court judgment says that first you have to have evidence that this crowd is going to turn riotous and it's a violent crowd. Then you must ask them to disperse. Then they must refuse your orders to disperse. Within the police manual, even after that, clear warnings, water cannon, then tear gas, then a lathi charge. And then the lathi charge should stop immediately. It should be the bare minimum. It should stop as soon as you feel your objective has been achieved. And only if you feel that the police is at harm, then there is firing, and there are rules as to how the firing has to progress as well. Next question. The Supreme Court's biggest warning to the police is a very important judgment on police violence that came after one of a very controversial crackdowns. Okay, so this was the Baba Ramdev Ramleela Maidan 2011. This was more recent. Okay, so basically what happened was Baba Ramdev, that yoga guru, thousands of supporters had gathered in protest of corruption and black money, and many protesters were sleeping in Ramleela Maidan, and the police actually moved in at night. A midnight crackdown, enforced prohibitory orders, used tear gas, used lathi charge to clear the ground. The operation left hundreds of injured. One woman later died from spinal injuries. In 2012, the Supreme Court ruled that the police action was excessive and held that the right to peaceful protest is a fundamental right, and force can never be the state's first response to peaceful assembly. The court ruled that emergency powers had been abused in that case, and the police failed to plan a proper dispersal. And the court reminded governments that force cannot be used as the first answer. And that was a really important judgment. Then there was another landmark judgment, and this was Anita Thakur versus the state of Jammu and Kashmir, 2007. There was a protest by daily wage workers and government employees in Jammu demanding regularization of their jobs. The protesters alleged the police used excessive force and lathi charge even though they were peaceful. So in the 2016 judgment, the Supreme Court said peaceful assemblies should not be met with force at all. It said that the force is justified only if the crowd turns violent, and even then it must be reasonable, proportionate, and the bare minimum necessary. The court also warned that police action can never become barbaric and continue after the situation has been brought under control. So these are really important if you're going to consider what happened yesterday. The court said very clearly that force is only justified if the crowd has turned violent. Even then, it must be reasonable, proportionate, minimum, and it should stop as soon as the situation is brought under control. And remember, the Supreme Court said it cannot become barbaric. So if we take a look at what happened yesterday, now the CJP says brutality, the Delhi police say that the protesters turned violent. These things cannot be, they cannot be true. Both cannot be true. So if it reaches the court, the judges will look for evidence. They will look for evidence of, did the police actually give out orders asking people to disperse? Was there enough evidence for the police to believe that these young people were violent? Did they react to that violence? What warnings were given? Was it appropriate, the force that was used? And could less harmful methods have worked? Now, there are other parallel questions that have come out from yesterday from the videos that show plainclothes personnel, for example, using lathis. There is no law expressively banning plainclothes people from assisting the police. Although D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal by the Supreme Court in 1997 did say that every police officer who's making an arrest must wear clear identification with the visible name tag and a designation so that the citizens can identify who is the officer using the force. This way, there is accountability. Today, that judgment is cited whenever questions come up about unidentified and plainclothes personnel participating in crowd control. So there is a precedent in our Supreme Court that police officers who are on duty and wearing their uniform have to wear their name tag and their designation, and the person who is the recipient of the force needs to be able to identify the police person that they are interacting with. The second question that came up about women protesters. Now, here's a gap in the Indian law that we found. The BNSS clearly lays down safeguards in the arrest of women, saying, that women police officers should be used, that women should not be arrested at night. But it doesn't say anything about crowd control specifically when it comes to women. There's no specific law prohibiting male officers from using lathis against women protesters. It's not specifically written down. In practice, in police manuals and operation guidelines, there is a strong preference for women personnel to handle women protesters, and there are specifically designed women battalions that are created for this reason. So legally, there is no statutory ban, but there is a clear precedent that the way where police is trained that women protesters should be handled by women officers. So now let's ask that question of, let's assume the police are standing on the road and there is a protest in front of them. Who makes the decision that this protest is going to turn violent? We have to start lathi charging. Who gives that order? Is it the police standing there? Is it their SHO or their station head officer? Is it the district magistrate? How far up do they have to go before that decision is made? Now, specifically, if we look at civil police, so Delhi police, RAF in aid of Delhi police, under section 148 of the BNSS, either any one of the following may lawfully order for that dispersal: executive magistrate, officer in charge of the police station, or SHO. So if the crowd refuses to disperse, that same officer may order force. The law does not require the prior approval of the Home Ministry or the district magistrate before a lathi charge. For the rapid action force, which is that, the blue uniform that you saw yesterday, when it is deployed in Delhi, it operates in aid of the civil administration. So RAF companies function under the overall law and order plan prepared by the local police and the police administration. They don't independently make decisions, so they come under Delhi police at that point. The district magistrate becomes legally essential if the police are unable to disperse that assembly and they have to call in the armed forces. So technically for Delhi, now given the fact that this is a high security zone at Parliament, it comes under the Home Ministry. and the intelligence agencies. So the IB and RAW and Delhi Police Commissioner, which means that since the preparation was already done and they already had a plan in place, it's very likely that the Home Ministry is the final authority. So it would have had a meeting with IB, with RAW, with Delhi Police, and decided what the plan was going to be. But the Union Ministry of Home Affairs is the final authority in that high security area that we were talking about, which is the Parliament area, as you could see. Now, this is the very important question. Let's assume the police action yesterday goes to court, and the court will then examine the evidence like I told you about. And then they will ask questions of who's responsible. Now, if there is a case in which the police is found to be lacking in process, will those individual police officers be held accountable? The law has a very clear rule here. It effectively says no. So Section 14 of the BNS says that nothing is an offense when it is done by a person who, by reason of a mistake of fact and not by reason of a mistake of law, in good faith believes himself to be bound by it. Let me explain. So basically, the illustration or the example is if a soldier fires on a mob because his superior officer has given him that order in conformity with those commands, he has not committed a crime. So if this officer in question, if this Delhi police personnel has been ordered to lathi charge, and he goes ahead and lathi charges based on that order, within the confines of that order, and it turns out that the order was wrong and misplaced, the individual officer is not at fault. That's what the law says. But of course, there will be a question on whether the order was in the right place or not. Was the order overextended, and did they do the right thing by ordering that lathi charge? Was it excessive? Should they have stopped at some point? Was there any evidence at all that these young people were not peaceful? Did they give orders verbally asking them to disperse, and those orders were, disregarded? There are many, many questions, and you can see we have, over the years of our independence as a country, built, a grammar about peaceful protest because it's such an integral part of who we are as a nation. And that clout of showing up in large numbers peacefully is how this country was born, and it cannot be denied. So at this point, really, we're looking to our judiciary. We're looking to the Delhi High Court that has incidentally refused to hear the matter today. But we're looking to the Delhi High Court and then to the Supreme Court to actually hear this matter with regard to all of the things that we talked about in this video, and give us a judgment that restores faith in process. Let me know in the comment section if you believe that that's actually possible, or it's true, or what you believe after hearing all of the arguments that are placed before you in this video.